Hi, I come to today with regard to the faith schools problem that we have at the moment and the illegal schools that are being set up that have been discovered that have unhygienic uh, facilities. I come to you as the first SMMP, the social media MP, which I feel that would suggest that others do, so that they provide a website and provide their ideas online, um, and so that the elected MPs can actually take the ideas up and perhaps put some of them into practice or to utilize them in some way, so that as a whole community we might improve the systems that we have in the world, because uh, MPs don't always have the full enough time to think on every issue deeply enough, and we all have our own um, preferences and our own specialities, and we may have ideas that others might not have because they just don't have time to think or haven't seen that particular aspect or thought along those lines, and that in this way we might improve society both in England and worldwide if we all begin doing this. But I just wanted to speak about the faith schools that we have, and obviously these illegal schools that have come to our notice uh, over this last few days in December 2015. Um, I mean, I have thought for a long time that due to the difficulties that Ireland had when they had segregated schools of Protestant and Catholic, and the divisions it caused there, and even terrorism, that I thought all the focus that we're having now of independent faith schools being allowed to set themselves up and being encouraged isn't necessarily a good idea, and I wouldn't advocate it myself, and would say that really all schools should be secular in principle, um, and that we have religious education in that each school, teaching on all the faiths, but because otherwise the children don't get a broad education. They're going to be taught a certain narrow field of study, because if you have a faith school, they're going to be their whole school curriculum is going to be coloured a little by that faith. Um, so, but if we can't do that, or until we can actually make all schools secular again along the lines um, that I mentioned, then I think um, each school, whether they're faith schools or secular schools, um, should have or yes, religious education, but as I think they're trying to change the name of it, and my suggestion to this was to be that it should be instead be called Philosophies for Life, um, and incorporate the religions into that, because there are many that now believe that God is a man-made concept. But in this Philosophies for Life, we should, under this heading, we should have maybe cover 6 to 8 of the main religions, to include Christian, Muslim, and Jewish, because they're the ones that are causing difficulty at the moment, and also a history of how the concept of God began, um, and then touch briefly on the Greek and other main philosophers, including the Greek myths, um, not in great depth, just to give the children an idea of all these issues, including atheism and evolution, because I think it's a case that even evolution you have to have a degree of faith about, because it's not completely proved, and that there are many things you have to take on faith, as it were, um, as to whether it is a, um, a, a theory that is absolutely true. I mean, there's many things they don't know. Um, and I think it's a case that we children should be made aware, because I understand whether it's in America in particular, and I think there are one or two schools even in England that teach on creationism, where it's based on the Bible, and the fact that there is some basis due to verses in there that God created the world and the universe or the world anyway, in 6 days, it being 6 days equaling 1,000 years. So it was created in 6,000 years. Now, my understanding of those verses that are in the Bible, um, that it just meant that it was a long period of time. To God, a day is as 1,000 years, and 1,000 years is a day. It doesn't necessarily mean that God created the earth in 6 days. It's just that God, God, time is of no consequence to God. Is infinite, is indefinite. Um, so this sort of thing, if children are only taught a certain narrow view of the creation of the world, for instance, and are not taught evolution, then they can't be critical on the matter. And it's the same with the Jews and the Christians and the Muslims. We need to read the Quran and the Bible, which has the Torah in it. Otherwise, we can't, so that we can see what people are believing equally as passionately as we might be, and we can then be critical. Because if we read other religion, what the others are reading and believing, we become more critical of what we're believing, because we think, oh, well, they're reading and believing just as much as I'm believing mine, and why is that? And the fact is that what we believe uh, is quite often comes from what we brought up with our family, or what we brought up within our social environment. Now, if we're brought up in another country and come here, then obviously they're going to believe in maybe the Muslim faith because that's what they've been brought up in. Or even if they're brought up here and they're living within their Muslim family, and then they're only socializing within their um, friends that are Muslims as well, then they will never integrate with England, and the same with the Christians. And it is the case that this is what happens. And we should be aware that the Quran has a verse in it which does say, don't befriend Jews and Christians. So we've got a problem there anyway, which I believe we can overcome, because my hope is that eventually the book I brought out, A Certain Myth or Is It True, which can be read free online at certainmyth.com, is an illustrated um, um, message, what I believe is the true message of God, having taken into consideration the Bible and the Quran, and when they agree, where they agree and disagree, and where the errors are taught, and the errors that we are taught by our preachers, be they the Archbishop of Canterbury or the Pope or the imams. There are things that are not actually based on what's in the Quran at all, and we're believing these things, acting on these things, distracted by these things, based on words that have no basis in these books. And then on top of that, because the books are not perfect, because they do contradict themselves, we can't take them absolutely in as reality. There may be an overall message there, which I've provided in a certain myth.com, if you want to go online to look at it. And although it's illustrated for adults and children. It's not a children's book, but a child from maybe 11 onwards could probably understand it, or maybe some not until a little bit later. But it is understandable. And it's designed so that it can be quickly read between 1 and 3 hours, and you get the general idea of the Bible and the Quran, where they agree and disagree, and the errors, and what faith and God might be, um, uh, very quickly. So you don't have to spend years or lifetime even reading these books, the Bible and the Quran, to get the overall end story, as it were, of these books. And I think this is really very important, because we are getting a lot of terrorism and that sort of thing based on the teaching that is a half teaching, or based on half the message, and only one of the prophets that God has sent. And the Quran does say we should listen to all the prophets, and it does say we should read the prophets from aforetime, or the writings from aforetime, which is the Bible. So, getting back to the what I think we should have in the being taught under religious studies, which I should now be called philosophies of life, as well as touching on maybe 8 religions, the atheism, evolution, and how the concept of God began. We should also teach them about the positive self-help manner of being, of setting goals, and that we are in control of our destiny. A destiny doesn't necessarily mean that we go out there in life and whatever happens to us, and we have no control over it. Because some of us do believe that. I believe that at one time when I was young, and they need to know that they can identify what is they're good at, um, in talent wise, skills wise, or and they can follow that direction and set up goals they want for their life, where they want to go in life. Um, and it's not just down to what just might happen to us ad hoc. It's something we can formulate. We can set a tree of what we want to do in life. So I think it's important that they are made aware of that early on. And I think that it's also a case that within the philosophies of life, stemming from that, or as a separate issue maybe, that each child, either by the teacher or um, maybe other individuals could be brought in that perhaps should be atheists, so that the children are not directed to any particular way, or if they're in a faith school, they should come from outside, so that the children have protection from being bullied, as it were, into a particular thought process about a religion. Is that they have counselling either every term or once a year, where they can discuss with this person, maybe for half an hour or an hour, what they want to do in life, where they feel their strengths are academically, um, um, whether they are being bullied in any way by other children and they're helped in that to either deal with it themselves, or they're directed to Childline or some other agency that helps with that sort of thing, or the other teachers or the headmaster could be uh, involved in some way if the child wanted that. Um, and if the child is being abused in some way at home, that this could also be identified and the child assisted. And that just if they're getting depressed, maybe the counsellor could identify that, and the assistance could be discussed with other teachers about that, and to help the child in that way. And that we give the child early on in life uh, the means to identify what they should do with belief, because it's a really quite a key important area of our life which we don't really pay any attention to. It's all very much about giving them information, but they also need to know about these other things, particularly when we're having so many difficulties with faith at the moment in the world. And belief, whatever it is, whether it's belief about believing in healing, or believe I'm going to be able to achieve this or that or the other, um, uh, it's a very powerful tool within us. I believe that I can achieve this exam, or I can achieve this in a life. And then they need to know the strength of that, and how we should, make sure that our beliefs are not contradicting each other, because that can cause division within ourselves as well. Um, which is why I think we should also involve the sort of self-help theories about setting goals and being positive and that sort of thing. And if we have negative thoughts in our mind, it causes us to feel negative. Um, and also about, to be the basics of being happy, really. That we need to um, be to eat properly, and that we need to exercise as well. We need to have friends, not just one friend necessarily, but several friends, and that we need to go out and have a variety of interests. Um, but sometimes we may only be somebody who likes one interest, or maybe we might only have one or two friends. But it doesn't matter if we don't, that we don't have lots of friends. Some have a lot, some have one or two really close friends. Some of us may not have a friend at all, but we're happy with our books and we just go to school and that's it. And that's all right as well. I was bullied at school, and then spent some years not having, a particularly a close friend, maybe till I was about 18 or 19 before I started trusting uh, people to have friends again, because of the difficulties I had at school. But I always felt that I was somehow abnormal because I didn't have friends, and I was always working on myself on how to be more interesting and not to be boring and this sort of thing. But in actual fact, now in all my lifetime, I've had maybe two or three or four good friends, and that's maybe sometimes all we might achieve in life. So if you only don't have any early on in life, it doesn't matter. We read our books, we focus on our school, because the most important thing in life is that we manage to get a job because we've got to provide for ourselves. Um, and they also need to know, the thing to do is not to go and have children early on in life. That's not the thing to do because you're bound up with life before you even start with all its problems. And if you can't afford a child, you shouldn't be having a child anyway. Basic things like this. And also for them, because obviously some children come out of very disorganized families that have come from, they drink a lot, or maybe they're in crime, or they've come from families that are not well, or depression and this sort of thing. That we need to give these children the basics of, look, if you do steal, you will be caught and end up in prison, or if you are on drugs, you will end up becoming a zombie and becoming ill, or if you take these tablets, if you go to parties, you could be unlucky and end up dead because just from that one tablet. Um, if you do drink too much, you will be drunk, and if you're too drunk and you drive, might kill yourself and others. You'll get in trouble with the police, and you damage your body. If you do drink too many fizzy drinks, or have too much chocolate, you will get diabetes and get overweight, and that will affect your health and doesn't make you happy. You can cause you to be depressed as well. And these basic uh, issues about life, I think we should cover in a new subject called philosophies of life. So I just put that forward that the media and the government might consider this.